All right, so it gets this. We're diving deep into the mind of Christopher Langan today.
Oh, wow.
This is the guy with an IQ reportedly somewhere between 195 and 210.
Yeah, some call him the smartest man in the world.
Exactly.
Definitely a fascinating figure.
Yeah, for sure.
And for our source material, we've got this in-depth interview that he did with Michael Knowles.
Okay.
And it really covers a lot of ground. We're going to be talking about his personal life,
Yeah.
his theories on the universe, even some pretty controversial opinions.
Yeah, the first thing that struck me was his life story. You'd think someone with that kind of intellect would be, I don't know, leading some cutting-edge research team.
Right.
Or maybe even heading up a tech giant.
Yeah.
But that's not Langan's path at all.
No, it's true. He seems to have really chosen those intellectual pursuits over more conventional markers of success.
Yeah.
He talks about working as a ranch hand, a bouncer, all sorts of jobs you wouldn't typically associate with someone of his mental capacity.
Yeah, and he wasn't just, passing time with these jobs.
Right.
He talks about reading Einstein and Bertrand Russell while he was out there on the ranch.
Wow.
Like, that's dedication to self-education.
It is.
But it sounds like he faced some real roadblocks along the way.
Yeah, he did.
Like what?
Well, he mentions facing intellectual elitism, particularly during his college years.
Oh, really?
There's this anecdote where he challenged a calculus professor.
Okay.
And the professor basically told him that he didn't have the brains to be a mathematician.
Wow. Talk about a blow to the ego.
Yeah.
Especially when you're likely the most intelligent person in the room.
Right.
It seems like economic factors play a role too, right?
Absolutely. Langan talks about how those barriers combined with the way others perceived his intelligence, like it was a threat almost that pushed him towards those blue-collar jobs.
Interesting.
Instead of a more traditional academic path.
So despite all that, he develops this incredibly ambitious theory of everything that he calls the CTMU. What is that all about?
Okay, so imagine trying to explain the fundamental structure of reality itself.
Okay.
That's what Langan attempts with the CTMU, the cognitive theoretic model of the universe.
All right.
He's really trying to bridge the ideas of Einstein with his focus on the geometric nature of reality, and Bertrand Russell, who emphasized logic and language.
So you're saying he's seeing reality as like a giant computer program with God as the programmer?
Exactly.
It's kind of a mind-blowing concept.
What is?
Because it challenges how we traditionally view both science and religion.
It does. At its core, the CTMU proposes that reality is a self-simulating system. Think of it as having two parts of display, which is our physical universe that we see, and a processor which Langan identifies as God.
Hold on. So he's directly linking his theory of the universe to the existence of God.
That's right. He argues that God isn't some separate being out there, but the very identity of reality itself. Pure existence, echoing that powerful I am statement from Exodus.
So it's not just a belief then.
No.
He's positioning this as a logical consequence of his theory.
Precisely. And he even goes on to describe a kind of panentheism.
Okay.
The idea that God is both within and beyond the universe. So God is processing its states, giving it coherence. He argues that the universe can't exist on its own. It needs this underlying intelligence, this God, to hold it all together.
I'm curious about where consciousness fits into all of this.
Oh, this is where it gets really wild. Langan proposes that consciousness isn't limited to humans or even living beings. He sees it as a property of the most fundamental building blocks of reality. The quanta, in his view, everything, even this table, possesses a form of consciousness.
Wait, are you telling me this table is having deep thoughts about its existence?
Well, not quite. He calls it generically conscious. It's not about the table pondering life's big questions. His point is that the basic capacity for processing information, for responding to stimuli, exists at the most fundamental level of reality.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack.
It is.
But if consciousness is everywhere, does that mean we have free will? Or is everything predetermined?
Well, Langan believes we do have free will.
Okay.
But it requires a more nuanced understanding of cause and effect than the traditional linear model. He introduces this concept of metacausation.
Metacausation? What in the world is that?
Okay, so imagine you're choosing a career path.
Okay.
Your future aspirations, the vision of where you want to be, influence your present decisions just as much as your past experiences do.
Okay.
That's metacausation in action, the future influencing the present just as much as the past does.
So it's not a straightforward one-way street of cause and effect.
Yeah.
It's more like a loop.
Exactly. Langan uses the analogy of picking up a glass of water.
Okay.
You think you're just moving it from point A to point B?
Right.
He argues the point you're moving it to point B actually exists in the future. So the future is in a constant dance with the present just as much as the past is.
But how does this loop idea connect back to free will?
Langan is saying our choices aren't simply predetermined outcomes of a chain of past events.
Okay.
They're also influenced by a future that's constantly being generated.
Hmm.
It's a radical departure from the idea that everything in the universe is already set in stone.
So where does God fit into this metacausation loop?
That's the key. God, in Langan's view, provides the processing power for this whole system, existing outside of time and space, yet permeating everything.
Okay.
Orchestrating this cosmic dance of cause and effect.
Yes.
It's a pretty mind-bending concept.
It is mind-bending.
Yeah.
So what happens to us after we die, according to Langan?
Okay.
Heaven, hell, reincarnation. What's his take?
Well, he's pretty clear that consciousness persists after death.
Okay.
But where you end up depends on your relationship with God. He believes those who reject God and truth end up creating their own personal hell, the state of suffering that they bring upon themselves.
So it's a you reap what you sow scenario in the afterlife.
Very much so.
Interesting.
He even describes Satan as a sort of anti-God, gaining coherence and power through human actions that reject truth and goodness.
So it's not just about believing in God.
Right.
It's about actively seeking a relationship with him and living in accordance with his truth.
Yeah, and that's where things get even more complex.
Okay.
Because Langan ties this back to the concepts of beauty and meaning,
Okay.
even talking about a telic economy.
A telic economy. That sounds intriguing. What does that even mean?
Langan uses telic economy to describe the idea that everything in the universe has a purpose, a telos, and that true beauty aligns with that purpose. He contrasts this with what he calls degenerate modern art,
Okay.
which he sees as offensive to this sense of inherent order and meaning.
So he's saying there's an objective standard for beauty.
Yeah.
And it's not just in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is, and it raises a whole host of questions about how we define beauty, how we perceive meaning, and what role God plays in all of this.
It sounds like we're only just scratching the surface of Langan's worldview here.
I think we've got a lot more ground to cover.
Yeah.
But you can already see how he weaves together these seemingly disparate ideas, physics, consciousness, God, even art, into a single overarching framework.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Fascinating is a good word for it.
Yeah.
So we're starting to get a sense of how Langan sees the universe, this incredibly complex system with God as the ultimate processor. But for those of us who aren't, geniuses with IQs over 200, what's the takeaway? How can we even begin to apply these ideas to our own lives?
Well, remember Langan's emphasis on seeking God and cultivating a personal relationship with him.
Right.
That's where he suggests we start.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding,
Right.
but a deeper spiritual connection.
Exactly. He even talks about his own journey of faith, how he spent years attending a small country church before ultimately feeling called to preach his own message.
Yeah.
It highlights that genuine faith isn't just about dogma or rituals. It's about lived experience, a direct connection with the divine.
But how does that work for those who struggle with faith?
Yeah.
Langan himself mentions being an atheist at one point in his life.
Right.
Does he address those who doubt or question the existence of God?
He's very clear that faith shouldn't be blind. He stresses the importance of rationality and understanding, arguing that faith and reason are actually inseparable.
Yeah, that resonates with me. It's not about checking your brain at the door when you walk into a church or temple.
Right.
It's about engaging your intellect, seeking understanding, and letting your faith grow from that deeper knowledge.
Absolutely. He points to figures like Thomas Aquinas,
Okay.
the medieval philosopher who used logic and reason to explore the mysteries of faith.
Right.
Langan sees that kind of intellectual rigor as essential for a genuine and meaningful relationship with God.
So it's not about choosing between faith or reason,
No.
but embracing both. It seems like he applies that same principle to his concept of beauty. Remember his discussion of the telic economy.
Yeah, you're right. He argues that true beauty is aligned with God's will, with the inherent purposefulness of the universe.
Right.
He challenges the modern idea that beauty is purely subjective, saying there's an objective standard rooted in this teleological order.
It makes you wonder how we experience beauty in our own lives. Whether it's the grandeur of nature, the power of music, or even the intricate design of a flower, there's a sense that we're tapping into something deeper,
Right.
something beyond personal preference.
It's as if we're recognizing a harmony and order that reflects the divine intelligence behind it all.
Yeah,
It makes you think perhaps our appreciation of beauty, our sense of awe and wonder, is a form of spiritual connection, a way of experiencing God's presence in the world.
that's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
And it ties back to Langan's advice about seeking meaning in our lives.
Yeah.
It's not just about accumulating wealth or chasing fleeting pleasures, but aligning ourselves with this deeper truth, this inherent goodness and beauty that he sees woven into the fabric of reality.
It's a call to live a more purposeful life, a life in harmony with God's will. He's challenging us to resist the forces that distract us from that pursuit, the voices that say meaning is subjective or truth is relative.
He's urging us to think critically, to question the narratives we're bombarded with, and to seek our own understanding of truth. It reminds me of that anecdote where he challenged his calculus professor who told him he didn't have the mental firepower for mathematics.
Yeah.
It's a pertinent example of how intellectual elitism can stifle truth and discourage those who dare to question the status quo.
It reminds us that those in positions of authority don't always have all the answers. It's a call to be courageous in our pursuit of truth, even if it means going against the grain, challenging authority, and risking rejection or ridicule.
It sounds like he's placing a lot of emphasis on that courage, that
Yeah.
willingness to stand up for what you believe in, and especially in this battle for truth he describes. But if free will is influenced by the future, as he suggests, with metacausation, how much control do we really have?
That's a great question. Remember his point about the future being constantly generated.
Right.
He's suggesting that we have a role to play in shaping that future, that our choices actually matter.
So it's not a passive acceptance of fate,
No.
but an active participation in creating the reality we want to see.
Exactly. It's an empowering message, especially in a world that often feels chaotic and beyond our control.
Right.
Langan reminds us we have the power to choose to align ourselves with truth and goodness and to contribute to a more beautiful and meaningful world.
Yeah, it speaks to a very human yearning for meaning, for purpose, for a connection to something larger than ourselves. But he doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of reality either. His descriptions of hell and Satan are pretty intense.
No, he doesn't sugarcoat things, but even his concept of hell emphasizes the power of choice. It's a self-created state of suffering resulting from rejecting God and truth. And his depiction of Satan is interesting, this anti-God figure gaining coherence through human actions that reject truth and goodness.
It's almost like he's saying we have a collective responsibility for the darkness in the world.
There's definitely that element in his thinking. He's challenging us to consider the consequences of our choices, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us.
That brings us back to his advice to seek God, cultivate that personal relationship. But what about those who feel they've been hurt or let down by organized religion?
Well, Langan acknowledges that organized religion can be flawed, even corrupted.
Yeah.
But he distinguishes between the institution and the underlying truth it's meant to represent.
Right.
He encourages individuals to seek a direct connection with God rather than relying solely on external structures or dogma.
It's about finding that inner compass, that sense of alignment with a higher purpose. But he also acknowledges that the path isn't always easy.
He talks about facing challenges, encountering resistance from those who feel threatened by his ideas. He even mentions being canceled from Wikipedia.
Wow.
For daring to suggest intelligent design as a possible explanation for the universe.
Wow. That's pretty extreme. Seems like he's not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
He's definitely not seeking to please everyone. He's committed to pursuing truth as he sees it, even if it means challenging conventional wisdom or facing backlash.
It's a reminder that intellectual honesty can come at a price. But it also raises the question, how do we discern truth when there are so many conflicting voices and perspectives out there?
Right.
Especially in a world where information is so readily available, yet so often unreliable.
That's a challenge we all face. Langan emphasizes critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and examining evidence carefully. He encourages us to be skeptical of easy answers and to be willing to engage in difficult conversations.
So it's not just about having a high IQ.
Right.
It's about using your intelligence wisely, discerningly. It's about developing a framework for understanding the world, and testing ideas against that framework.
He even suggests that some people with high IQs can get trapped in a narrow focus, missing the bigger picture.
Right.
He talks about the importance of expanding one's mental aperture, being able to see both the details and the grand sweep of things.
It's like he's saying intelligence isn't just about solving puzzles or winning arguments.
Right.
It's about using your mind to grapple with the big questions, to understand the world around you, and to find your place within it.
He also critiques the modern education system, arguing that it often stifles genuine learning and critical thinking. He sees it as more of an indoctrination factory designed to produce compliant citizens rather than independent thinkers.
That's a pretty scathing indictment.
It is. He even suggests that many academics, even those in fields like philosophy, are more concerned with conforming to the prevailing ideology than with pursuing truth.
He's not pulling any punches, is he?
Not at all. But his critiques are thought-provoking. They make you wonder about the state of intellectual discourse in our society.
Yeah.
Are we truly free to explore ideas, to challenge assumptions, or are we being subtly steered towards a particular worldview?
That's a question worth pondering, and it ties back to his call for courage and independent thinking.
Yeah, he's urging us to be skeptical of the narratives we're presented with, whether they come from the media, the government, or even respected institutions.
Right.
He reminds us that truth often emerges from challenging the status quo, from questioning the accepted wisdom.
He's not just talking about intellectual pursuits either. He applies this same critical thinking to his political views.
Right. He criticizes both the left and the right.
Okay.
Arguing that both have become corrupted by those who prioritize power and wealth over truth and meaning.
It's a pretty bleak assessment of the political landscape.
It is, but he's not advocating for apathy or disengagement.
Right.
He's actually calling for a return to principles, a focus on core values that transcend political labels.
So it's about seeing through the partisan rhetoric and focusing on what truly matters.
Exactly. He's urging us to think for ourselves, to make choices based on what we believe to be true, and write not on what's convenient or popular. It's a challenge to break free from the echo chambers and groupthink that dominates so much of our discourse today.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge worth taking on if we genuinely want to create a better world.
It's a tall order.
Yeah.
But it aligns with his overall message of personal responsibility and the power of choice.
He's reminding us that we're not just passive observers, we're active participants in shaping the reality we inhabit. And that's both empowering and daunting at the same time.
You know, it's interesting how Langan connects this idea of personal responsibility to his own experience with intelligence agencies.
Oh, yeah.
He claims they take UFOs and aliens seriously.
Right.
Even suggesting that high-ranking officials have reported abductions. Pretty wild.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild claim, but he ties it back to his view of reality as this merging of mind and matter. He suggests that these UFO sightings, these phenomena that seem to defy the laws of physics,
right,
might have a mental component.
He even shares his own experience seeing a UFO.
Yeah.
Describing a large metallic object just hovering in the sky. It makes you wonder if there's more to these stories than just misidentified aircraft or weather balloons.
Langan certainly thinks so.
Right.
He's very open to exploring possibilities that many would dismiss as outlandish. But he always approaches these topics with a sense of rationality and intellectual rigor.
He's not just blindly believing in conspiracy theories.
Right.
He even criticizes those who do, saying that true understanding requires both faith and reason.
He's walking a fine line there.
Yeah.
Acknowledging the limits of our current knowledge while also being willing to consider alternative explanations.
Yeah.
It's that open-mindedness that I find so intriguing about Langan.
It's like he's saying, don't just accept the conventional wisdom.
Right.
Question everything, explore all possibilities, and use your own intelligence to discern what's true.
Exactly, and he applies that same principle to his own life.
Yeah.
He talks about how the CIA tried to recruit him.
Really?
But he refused.
Why?
Because he didn't want to compromise his pursuit of truth.
That takes a lot of conviction.
It does.
Especially when you're dealing with organizations that are known for their secrecy and their ability to exert influence.
It speaks to his commitment to intellectual independence, his refusal to be swayed by power or authority.
He's a true maverick in that sense.
He is.
Well, this has been quite a journey into the mind of Christopher Langan.
It has.
We've covered everything from his unconventional life to his complex theories of the universe, consciousness, and God.
Yeah.
We even touched on aliens, globalism, and the future of humanity.
It's certainly a lot to process.
It is.
Langan's ideas are dense, challenging, and often controversial, but they're also incredibly thought-provoking.
Yeah.
They push us to think differently about the world and our place within it.
One thing that really stuck with me is his emphasis on the telic economy. That idea that everything in the universe has a purpose and that true beauty aligns with that purpose.
Right.
It's a different way of looking at the world.
It is.
And it makes me want to pay more attention to the beauty that surrounds us, to see it as a reflection of something deeper, something meaningful.
That's a great takeaway. It's about shifting our perspective.
Yeah.
Moving beyond the superficial.
Yeah.
And seeking out that underlying order, that
Yeah.
connection to something greater than ourselves.
And his call to seek God, to cultivate a personal relationship with him.
Right.
It's something that I think resonates with a lot of people, even those who might not consider themselves religious.
Yeah.
There's a longing within us for connection, for purpose, for something that transcends the everyday grind.
He's speaking to that yearning for meaning, that desire to find our place in the grand scheme of things. And he's offering a path, a way to align ourselves with something larger than ourselves.
Whether you agree with everything Langan says or not,
Right.
there's no denying that he's a brilliant and provocative thinker.
Yeah.
His ideas challenge conventional wisdom and force us to confront some of the biggest questions about existence, consciousness, and the nature of reality.
He's a true original, and his work is sure to spark debate and inspire reflection for years to come.
If you're intrigued by what you've heard today, I encourage you to explore Langan's work further and form your own conclusions.
Yeah.
His website is a great place to start.
And remember, as Langan himself emphasizes, don't just take our word for it.
Right.
Think critically, question everything, and seek out your own truth.
That's all for this deep dive into the mind of Christopher Langan. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking that deeper meaning and purpose that lies at the heart of it all.